Hello, I'm King Link, and it's the final day of E3 2019. I'll be honest, I'm exhausted. It's been far harder to make these videos than I expected, and I've been up late to make them, so let's just jump in, get started, and I'm sorry if there's a little lower energy. Pokemon Sword and Shield. By the way, no video here was provided. I also really don't want to run against Nintendo for copy claims, so we'll just go with what we have. So I arrived at E3 early today and immediately got in line for Pokemon, which has been crazy busy this whole show, but really so has all of Nintendo's booth. And honestly, I've learned it's Pokemon. I mean, really, I haven't played the series since it hit the 3DS. Admittedly, I don't have a 3DS, but this is a great version of Pokemon with a huge cast apparently. Now, I was told by a representative that there's 800 Pokemon in the game. I'm unsure how accurate that is or how many are catchable with just one or both of the games, but it sounds absolutely massive. In the demo of the game, I worked my way through a water-based gym. The puzzle of the gym was a switch puzzle that felt a little simple. There were three colored pipes, red, blue, and yellow, and each had a switch of their type that swapped between the same color for water to flow out of. It's a little hard to explain, but once you see it, it's pretty easy to understand. And it sounds simple, and perhaps it was, but the final moves of the puzzle actually challenged me. There was a small, clever trick that they had that engaged my mind for a minute and gave it a feeling that it was being challenged, though it was light. After I made it through to the gym leader, I took her down in an epic fight. Well, it was 6 Pokemon to 2 Pokemon. A little easy and one-sided, but whatever. And however, during that battle, I saw a new feature called Dynomax, which makes your Pokemon grow. Part of me really wants to make a Mighty Morphin Power Rangers joke there, but it really is like that. Your character grows to more than 10x the size. The huge form of the Pokemon appear behind the character rather than in front, but I feel like your characters turn from normal Pokemon to epic monsters. And my understanding is that you can only use this once a battle, and every Pokemon has a huge form. Though I was only able to use it in the final battle, not each battle leading up, and it feels like a little bit of a strange step, but it'll be a question of when do you want to trigger the ability, why. Maybe there's going to be more to it than just this. It is an interesting move. I do want to call out, though, my personal favorite Pokemon in my set of 6 that I had in the game. That was Yamper. If you have seen him, he's a Corgi-like Pokemon. He might not be the biggest, he might not be the strongest, pretty much sure he's not the strongest, and he might not be the best. But he's a Corgi, and, he'll be my main. Knowing how much I love dogs, at some point I'm going to probably have to run a 6 Yamper team. Dicey Dungeon. So after Pokemon, I swung by Indiecade today. I wanted to check something out, and Dicey Dungeon was available. I'm a fan of Euro board games, dice games, and RPGs, and Dicey Dungeon has all of that. But it also contains what appears to be an interesting rogue-like or rogue-lite style. I'm not sure which. The game is played on a dungeon map where the player can move and will walk into enemies. The entire game is played with a mouse, making for a simple and easy setup. Combat in the game is interesting, and players will automatically roll the dice, and the dice can be used in for one of 3 skills that are set up by you. My 3 that I used were an attack, a reroll ability, and eventually I got a earth-based attack that weakened the enemy. Weakened enemies actually will change a ability for a lesser form. It's an interesting mechanic to harm an enemy's output outside of direct damage. The dice rolls, though, are your main power, so, like using a 6 would be more damaging than using a 4 for the same attack. Over the course of the dungeon, I actually gained a level that got me an extra dice. I think it also got me extra abilities later. The abilities are really where the game's at. There's a number of them, and I can think of really good loadout potentials. There was an enemy ability that actually took a dice and sliced it up into ones. So his rolled 5 became 5 dice that each show 1. Some abilities had limits, such as, can use a max value of 4. Others had a requirement of you only accepting number ones, so the ability to slice up the number five to ones helped him out quite a bit. You know, overall though, this is an indie game. And I do have to be honest, there's small things about it that I really missed. There's no rolling animation at all. The player just kind of gets dice that appear, and the attacks are just simple. The attack slides forward and it's done. There's no animation for it. I do like the whole process of diving into a dungeon and exploring it. The gameplay did feel right. It's just more that the visual fluffery that's I felt was a little bit missing. And you know what? In hindsight, it probably isn't as necessary. Cyberpunk 2077. I'm going to go a little bit faster here. There's a lot I have on this one. But here it is. The Cyberpunk 2077 was a hands-off demo. But dear God, there was so much shown. The game starts with the player sitting down and talking to just an NPC with a Jamaican accent, and right away there's a timed response. The player only has a few moments to really decide what to do and say, and it's a small window. According to the developers, your choices will matter. If you press issues, NPCs might get a little cagey. You can ask about certain things going on or be subtle about it. In fact, there's even a new stat here called Cool that, as I talked to the developer, I understood it to be a dialogue skill ability that allows you to unlock more quests or dialogue options. There are a number of places in the game where I saw little stat indicators as well during conversations as well as gameplay, though they weren't talked about exactly that much, but it looks like there's a really nice system underneath this. Keanu Reeves, of course, made an appearance in the demo. I was watching. He felt like a call out, showing off that he is there. There was a reference that, hey, you know who that is. He said a single line or two, and he kind of hung out in frame for a scene. I've heard he'll be with you the whole time, but in this case, I didn't see much more than all of you have out there. Honestly, the world of Cyberpunk 2077 is all about that cyberpunk style, and it shows. It's a fictitious place in the world, and there's a number of groups. Two big groups shown were the Netrunners, who are people who know how to hack efficiently, and there's actually a government-run counter-hacker group, though I forgot their names, Netwatch. And of course, the Netrunners are aligned with gangs, and there seems to be a whole ecosystem here. The two big groups, so the Netrunners and Netwatch, seem to be at odds with each other and potentially with you, or at least the groups that you're aligned with. Though I feel like there's a space that the player might be able to join either group. I'm really curious what's going to happen next in the story, to be honest, from what I've seen. There was also like an interesting hacking mini game about collecting hexadecimal numbers from a grid that unlocks the entire enemy's network, as well as giving a little different boost to the player from the hack depending on what they do. I believe you could do like better hacks. I haven't seen anything like that system before, and that's a good sign. The demo also showed off a cool motorbike that our character was driving on, even a third person view of it. And with the promise the player is going to be able to own vehicles, it sounds like a wide range of vehicles are going to be available, and they're all going to have that kind of like futuristic cyberpunk feel to it. You know, cool, little rocket bikes. I bet you there's going to be some cool like Knight Rider cars, stuff like that. And there's actually parts of the demo that the devs played through twice. Once with a skillful stealth character, a hacker's type setup that looked great in motion, and then the second time with a strength augmented fighter who eventually had a large shootout with enemies, but also was able to like rip doors open and take out guys pretty well from behind the scenes. To be honest, though, the gunplay in this does look a little bit slow, especially after playing games like Doom and Wolfenstein. But I also think it's clear that these are different genres and different games for different players. And the gunplay here feels like it could be right for this world, but it does also feel off, especially when you're considering anything else that has guns. There's so much more, though, to this game. There's a lot of hackable objects, such as once you breach the network, you can actually trigger a weight system for a weight rack to raise the weight limit and kill the person working out on it. There's a training bot doing like a sparring match, and you could hack it to kill the person fighting him and distract everyone. There's little pieces like that. Other ones like using a human shield to block a turret that's shooting at you, ripping a turret out of a socket if you're strong enough, or even hacking the turret is an option. You can even hack a human and then use his info to hack his squad, making them pull the pins on their own grenades or just forcing them to shoot themselves in the head. It's honestly, it just looked great. The fact is, I walked out of this demo with just one desire. I want to see how much truth there is in what the devs were saying. I wanted to see what happens if you did anything other than what they showed. I wanted to see the rest of the world. Really, I just want a hands-on, so I can finally play this game and see how good it really is. I do, however, have to say, I realized much of what I really liked yesterday about Watch Dogs Legion, that world, the future version of London that they have, appears to be done quite a bit better in CyberPunk. And it's going to be interesting. These games are now 1 month apart for release dates, and I foresee them going head-to-head in a few ways. But I also think Cyberpunk doesn't have much to worry about. Watch Dogs is going head-to-head with them. Well, they're going to have more issues. Marvel's Avengers. I got to see a hands-off of Marvel's Avengers from Eidos and Crystal Dynamics. This is the new game from the studio who did Tomb Raider, and, well, okay, we'll have to talk about this. You see, Marvel's Avengers looks weird. And I really didn't want to say this as I went in, but I'm almost forced to. Something is off about these characters, and while maybe there's something graphical behind it, I believe at the end of the day it's due to the fact that you're seeing non-movie versions of these famous characters, and, I don't think this should be considered a huge problem or negative, but it's really hard not to notice. This isn't the Captain America, the Tony Stark, the Thor, or the Black Widow we're used to seeing, and the game is going for an ultra-realistic look that makes it hard to avoid comparing the models. Perhaps as the game goes on, the player's mind will learn to accept these new versions of the characters, but it's definitely jarring for the demo that we saw played. Now, with that said, the game does look great outside of these main characters. In addition, it seems like each character had his own flair for gameplay. At first, it just seemed like Thor was playing like God of War, a typical action game. Of course, he was throwing his hammer and using lightning all over the place, but then all of a sudden, Iron Man took over. He had a flying section where he was shooting down enemies, and he seemed to be more of a shooter with a tech guy, using his shoot's technology for his abilities. Then Hulk became a pure brawler. Also, I do want to say I think Hulk does look great in this game. Banner is noticeably different than the MCU's version, but Hulk looks and feels about the same to me, or even better here. Captain America has a shield-based fighting style, both with blocking and then throwing his shield. And of course, finally, Black Widow, Natasha, uses her guns, shooting enemies, and she actually was more like using dodges to dodge out of the way of the attacks. Now, the level played was very linear, with each character getting a chance to shine. It would go from one character to the next in the order that I talked about. I'm unsure if that's to show off the characters, teach you a tutorial, or if the game will be this linear, but the game did a great job of storytelling along with the adventures and the action. Now, the demo showed off Taskmaster as the villain of this piece of the game. Marvel fans know that he's not a mercenary, not really the head guy, but Black Widow was the one directly fighting him. The entire time the game was set up as a larger story, though, so he's probably just a piece of this section. However, the boss battle was far longer than I expected it to be, with no health bar showing for Taskmaster. I was kind of curious how much damage he was taking. It seemed to take a very long time, but I'm sure that can be fixed much later. But at the end, well, the demo ends with Captain America falling. And the Avengers actually end up getting blamed for a ton of damage done. It's a strange tone. One of the most popular characters in the Avengers dying in the opening cinematics makes me think this is some level of fake out. He even has his own part of the logo, so I think he's coming back. The entire world, though, turning on the Avengers just feels weird because they were first being celebrated at the beginning of the demo. I always feel like it's odd when a superhero, everyone's like, they're the bad guy, after everything good they've done. I'm getting off topic, though. But I think this is just a level set up for the demo, or it's just a story that's going to open up quite a bit more. We'll see when the game finally comes out. Now, there was also a mention, I talked quickly with the developer who was there, a guy I actually knew, but we'll talk about that another time. There's a mention of opening up the game more, customizing your heroes, and expanding your team. Honestly am cautiously optimistic here. The style of the characters is still strange, but if the game's play is anywhere close to how exciting the video that we were looking at was, this could be another major entry in the Marvel video game franchise. Borderlands 3. Now, a very quick note. I forgot to get a press pass, or I lost the card. Due to the late hour, I'm probably not going to be able to get one until it's too late. I have an idea of how I can make it up if I do get one in the future. This is 100% my fault for not asking or keeping the card that they gave me. However, Borderlands is back, and it looks like Gearbox brought back all the right elements here. There is a whole new set of characters here, but a pair of villains actually have this loyal band of zealots willing to follow them to the ends of the earth. They idolize them as gods. And yet, those villains still crack wise the entire time. They're actually quite funny. This time around, Borderlands 3 sets up the player to explore multiple planets, flying a spaceship called Sanctuary 3. It seems that they're showing off a new planet called Eden 6, I believe it was, and it looks great here. Though, admittedly, they say it's completely new. It does kind of remind me of areas of the zombie DLC, Zombie Island of Dr. Ned. Though there are all new wildlife in the game, they look great, and the fact is, I'm sure it's going to stand out in the final version of the game. It's just, mentally, that's what I saw when I first saw it. Now, there are 3 announced characters at this time. If you haven't seen them, you can check out other videos. The new character announced today, though, was Mose, who can actually summon this giant mech. And I played the demo with her, and I have to say, the experience was excellent. The giant mech kind of reminded me of Titanfall, with how she kind of summons it, jumps in the giant mech, rides around in it, and then eventually has to leave it. In addition, a second player can climb on top of her mech and use an additional turret if you get that skill boost. It's an interesting new addition, and it makes me wonder what other changes the other characters may have, if any. There are also multiple action skills for each character this time. Mose, for instance, seems to have at least 6 different action skills. She can equip 2 of them, one for each arm of her giant mech. Now, the other characters appear to have 1 action skill. And each character can have a selection from numerous choices. It actually makes the game feel a little bit better as you go along. In addition, there's little equipable add-ons that can change the way they work, so on. At the same time, Gearbox also seems to be really pushing the social interactions here. They kind of focused on the single player players and said, now you can see your friends' guns that they're selling and buy them if you want. Or you could share random enemies that you can both go find and get good loot from. Or send items to a friend even if they're offline. You know, they're really interesting ideas. Though I would say that the type of player who is playing single player really, that's what I like to play, isn't the one who's looking for these features. However, each of these does sound useful to players of any type and will likely be very popular with the players who are playing multiplayer. There's also a large amount of customizations where some previous games stuck to, kind of tame customization options. There appears to be all new heads. I think I saw a horse head at one point. I think a astronaut's helmet. You can choose your own. There are also bodies, emotes, weapon trinkets that allow you to customize your gun, and reusable gun skins. It's really a big step up. All of this allows you to create your own very unique look, and the fact is the company is proactively saying there are no microtransactions is a good sign. They do say that specifically related to the customization, but I do want to think that's for the entire game. I really hope they wouldn't pull that. There's also an appearance of Tiny Tina in the trailer that we saw. No voice in that trailer. I still found it hopeful to see her back as well. I really liked her in Borderlands 2. Overall, though, I think Borderlands 3 is in a good place, and I found myself laughing at the demo that we played. Also, the video, I'm going to probably have to check it out in the fall, even if it is on Epic. We'll talk about Epic another time. Terrorarium. I was invited to check out Terrorarium, if that is the right way to say it, at the Indiecade booth. Now, Terrorarium is a interesting little game, hard to say though. It definitely looks like Pikmin when I was playing it. You walk around an area and throw your Mugu. Now, there are a number of different types of Mugu, which are these mushroom looking characters in the game, such as Heavy, Fire, and Glue. I find the game to kind of be charming, with the main character here known as an alien, as a gardener who actually brought these Mugu down. As a note, by the way, I am using images that was provided to me. I don't think there was a video available for this, so that's what's going on there. Now, the levels here are all small puzzles, with a number having simple solutions and processes to win the game. There's a number of interesting mechanics where the dead Mugus can be harvested to create more Mugus, so if something dies, you can always bring it back. So even if a player makes a mistake, the player will have a chance to restore the current state of the board. Most of my Mugu actually tended to die in lava, though, and the respawns have this effect of exploding upwards and outwards, sending half of the new Mugu into the fire a second time. Also, the Mugu who were trying to heal people, mindlessly chased the dead corpses that they wanted to respawn inside danger like lava. At the same time, the levels here are quite short, so it's easy to restart, and they're meant to be played in a quick sitting, and failing is intended to be fun according to the developers. I'm unsure if that's exactly what happens, especially when some of the frustration about planting the characters, but I still did find myself having a good time with it and wanting to take one more crack each time I died. I never found the game to be overly frustrating. I do think some levels, especially those requiring jumping, took too fine an aim, or just that the Mugu got out of where I was comfortable with them. And others with lava aren't very clear about how you can avoid it other than pulling in your Mugu as tight as possible. Now, the game comes with a fully functioning editor, and that editor was used to make all the levels in the game out of a series of templates. So, if you're a content creator and want to find something to do here beyond just beating the levels available, you can make your own set of levels and put it up on Steam Workshops. But the game does remind me of games like Overlord and Pikmin in its gameplay. It's just not fully there right now. Though the developers are talking about adding a campaign to the game, and personally, I wouldn't mind seeing longer maps or a more fleshed out experience. The games that clearly inspired this game come from a solid pedigree, but there's not many games like this on PC, and hopefully it can do well. So finally, we come to the final game of the final day of E3, and of course, it's Final Fantasy VII Remake. I mean, how could it not be? This was one of the biggest games being shown off this year, and I made a special point of ensuring I could see it. I actually got in on the last show, so yes, this was the final Final Fantasy VII demo. I'll stop with that. I'll also say this was a really well done presentation. Most presentations are like Borderlands, where you come into a room, you watch a video, you hear a dev talk, and then you move on to a second room and play a game. However, Final Fantasy VII upped the production values, where they had everyone sit down and they started a rather dull video about Mako production in Midgar. And then suddenly, as I was looking down to get my notebook, the video glitched. There was a hack attempt, and the screen showed Jesse, a character from the original game that was part of Avalanche, giving us a briefing about shutting down the Mako reactor. It was unexpected, and the lights in the room started flashing red. It was a great way to set up the demo, and honestly, I just want to call out the presentation because it was that extra mile that you would never be able to experience at home in the same way. It's the same reason why the theme parks, still are popular, even with all the technology we have. Jesse explained the game and then talked about pretty much the same info you've heard in the Square Enix press conference. Using small attacks hurts the enemy, using the ATB that charges up to kill them, blah blah blah, magic is a thing, items cost ATB, so on. However, when I played the game, it seemed like the smaller attacks were taking out the majority of enemies. That's not really a problem, and I'm sure it will change over time in the game. Is a lot that I heard and want to talk about outside of E3. Some people saying there's swearing, like hard swearing. I heard damn in the game, but that was it, and I'm okay with damn. Also, I could talk about the game, the length, how it's going to be released. I don't have new information on that, so maybe we'll talk about that another time. Now, when Jesse's presentation was over, the video showed the iconic opening of the train pulling into that first station and Cloud jumping off, ready to fight. And honestly, I got a little choked up. It's strange, but Final Fantasy VII was the first video game I bought for myself after I got my first job. It was the game that I bought the original PlayStation for, so there's actually a lot of history for me with this exact title. Uh, the demo itself, though, feels really good. The combat is tight and fluid, there's no transitions or loading screens, and I like the way the ATB almost stops time. Almost. I was able to queue up attacks and use limit breaks. The demo goes through the same opening boss battles in the Mako reactors, and it's a solid experience. Though it is what was shown in the press conference, admittedly, it still was so much fun to do it ourselves. I do want to say I did notice some pixelation, at least on the monitor I was really close to it though, so maybe that's what was going on. And then there was some artifacts like in Cloud and Jesse's hair. I'm not sure if it's intended, it's a bug, or if this is just an early build. Hopefully that gets fixed. I'm just calling it out because it was just a little bit noticeable. I do want to say though, I noticed when watching the videos this time through for the cutscenes, there's more expression in both of these characters. There's a point where Barrett makes a face like he doesn't trust Cloud, and you can totally tell it from just the motion of his face. Even in this, if the story is the same beat for beat, just the looks and expression and the movement of the characters is going to deepen the experience far more than you realize. But I also believe there's going to be more to the story, such as there's a point where Cloud sees a black feather. I think we can tell who that might be, but I won't go into speculation at this point. It was not in the original game, though, so that's a good sign. Now, I am hopeful for Final Fantasy VII Remake. I do have a lot of opinions based on what I've heard on other stuff, number of episodes, speed they're coming out, total cost, number of changes. Honestly, I don't think it's necessary to talk about when I'm talking about the E3 demo, but I also left the E3 booth hopeful. I really do work hard not to wear nostalgia goggles for any game, but Final Fantasy VII, damn it, it pulled me back to who I was 21 years ago, for good and perhaps for bad. Though I also do want to point out that I'm sure there's a significant number of attendees at E3 this year who were born after the original game came out, which made me feel so tremendously old. Conclusion. So that was E3 2019. I've done a report on every game I've played. Admittedly, I didn't talk about the Pixel Cube. That was kind of hard to photograph. It wasn't an official video game, but I left it off here. I will say, if you do hear about it, Pixel Cube, it is very unique. So, well, that is the end of the E3 2019 recaps. I do want to talk a little more about E3, but admittedly, alright, guys, I'm tired. I had like 3 hours of sleep each of the last 2 nights because of videos. I'll probably be up late to get this set up and published due to, forgetting to get a press kit and other stuff. It's going to take me a day or two, but then I'm going to come back. I'm going to wrap up E3. I'll pick my game of the show after some deliberation. I have one in mind, but I want to avoid a recency bias, so I want to look at all the games one more time. And I'll answer the question, should you go to E3? It's not a simple yes or no, and we'll talk about it then. Until then, though, like, share, and subscribe. Do all that YouTube stuff. It's appreciated as always. And I will see you next time.